Hello everyone, today I have an absolutely insane game for you. This was 94 moves long, and towards the end I got into massive time trouble and ended up having to pre-move 22 moves in a row. So it came after I played pawn to e4, and my opponent played pawn to d5, the Scandinavian defense. I captured, they recaptured, and I now went knight to c3 here, developing the knight as well as attacking their queen, so it comes with tempo, and they moved it to a5 here. That is the main line, the other main line being queen back to d8, at which point I developed bishop to c4. They went c6, making a getaway square for their queen, as well as controlling the important central square, d5. I now developed knight to f3, knight f6, pawn to d3 is what I played here, opening up my bishop for development. It probably would have been slightly better to play pawn to d4 to gain better control of central squares, but pawn to d3 is still an okay move. My opponent played bishop to g4 here, pinning my knight to my queen, and here, fearing some queen to f5 idea and my knight being pummeled, I played the move pawn to h3, essentially attacking black's bishop and making them make a decision, either to capture the knight or to back it up somewhere. However, here I actually missed their idea, which was to play the move queen swings over to h5. Now what this move does is it pins the pawn to the rook, so now I cannot just capture because then my rook would be lost, and that is very, very bad. Instead, I played bishop to f4 here. And now what my opponent could have done here is immediately traded on f3. I would have to capture, and after captures, my opponent has a small advantage in this endgame because I have doubled isolated f-pawns, but black does have very limited development here, and because of that, the engine giving about equal. So instead, credit my opponent, they played knight b to d7, not immediately capturing, instead developing a piece and preparing to long castle very soon, at which point I didn't really want to castle short because my pawns would be double and that would be very bad, so I tried queen to e2 here, preparing to long castle, at which point, and now my opponent captures, I captured back with the queen, captures, and this is the position. Once again, my opponent here has a small advantage because of these bad pawns, but there is still a game to be played. Now, my opponent here wanted to long castle, but they cannot just yet because then the f7 pawn is lost, so they played pawn to e6 here, and I now put my knight on e4, centralized square. If they capture, this is not very good because I can capture back the f-pawn, and now my pawns are undoubled, and I am doing great. So instead, they just long castled here. But this was actually the move that I wanted them to play, and they actually now fell for kind of my trap here because my idea is not to trade or to give some check, it's actually to move to g5. And now, because black long castled, f7 is a threat of a fork of the two rooks, and they have no way to defend the pawn. Now, black here can still get a worse, but, decent position if they tried, like, knight to d5 here, counter-attacking my bishop, and if I capture, they can capture back. And now knight takes m7 isn't as good because they have this check, and their exchange is going to be saved. They're only going to be down one pawn. However, here they freaked out and played knight to b6. Now, this is a terrible move because it attacks my bishop, but I just don't care because I can capture an f7. The rooks are forked, and I am borderline winning here. And the reason I'm saying borderline is there's still a game to be played. They captured on c4 here, and the engine's best is to capture back on c4 and let the fork just hang there, but I decided to capture on d8 first. Now they captured on b2 here, and now having to move my knight out of the way, I played knight captures on e6. So I'm up a pawn and an exchange. The black does have a check here, bishop to b4 check, and I do have to be a little careful. If I just move my king up, this looks good because now my rooks are connected, but a simple rook over to e8. My knight is pinned, it's going to be lost, and now black once again has the advantage. So instead, I played bishop back to d2 here, blocking the check with my own bishop. If they traded, then I can just capture back. I'm doing very well here, and if they tried rook to e8 in this position, it's just not scary because I can capture on b4, and if they capture here, I can just run my king to d2 once again, and I'm doing very well. So they here played bishop back to d6, which is probably one of the best moves. When you're down material like my opponent is here, you really do not want to trade pieces because it's going to make the opponent's life so much easier. At which point now I castled. And the reason I castled here as opposed to before is that black simply does not have enough firepower, and because of that, there's not really any way that they can attack me. Here they now played rook to e8, attacking my knight, and because I castled, I can now play a timely rook after e1, defending the knight, as well as potentially getting some sort of trading business in here. I did not play knight takes on g7, because then rook to g8, and I'm still doing decent here after like bishop to c3, but then my piece would be lost, and why would I go through all this hassle when I could just instead play a move like rook f to e1 and not lose the piece in the first place. My opponent now played knight to d5, good move, centralizing the knight, potentially trying to get to their rook on the f file in the future to attack the pawns. I played rook over to b1, attacking the knight. They only have one square, knight to a4, and knights on the rim are grim is a very common saying because when the knight is on the rim, it has a lot less squares than it usually does, and this is one of those cases. The knight is very limited, and now I captured on g7, and the reason it works here is that my opponent played rook to g8, and this idea doesn't actually work because I have the very nice rook up to e8 check. Now I'm checking both of these, or I'm checking the king and attacking the rook, and because of that they are forced to capture, at which point now my knight captures back, and I am safe. I'm now up 2 pawns and an exchange. It is a little scary after bishop to e5 because my knight temporarily is trapped, but a simple rook to e1 here, and there is nothing actually scary because I'm just attacking the bishop, and after it moves, my knight will be defended and it will have a getaway square somewhere, and they here played bishop to c3. I think this is a bit of a mistake because of the same thing. You do not want to trade when you are down material because it's going to make my life a lot easier. So here I happily traded, I captured, they recaptured, and because my knight is well defended and I have both these escape squares, I do not have to move it out just yet. Here I just played a3, not losing the pawn for no reason. My opponent played king to d7, putting pressure on the knight. I didn't have to move it, but this is probably the best time of any to move it. I played knight to g7. Now my opponent here did get a little tricky with their knight. They played knight to f4 here. Now they're threatening my pawn on h2. There's no good reason to lose that, so I played king to h2. Sorry, my pawn on h3 is what I meant. Now my king is defending, and they tried knight to b5 here. My pawn is attacked. I simply pushed it up, and they moved their knight to d4. As they move their knight to c3, I would simply push once again. I'm doing very well, but they played knight to d4. Now they're attacking on f3 here. I do actually have to be quite careful because if I just play a random move and I let them capture, all of my advantage is gone. I'm forked, and this is terrible. But here, I actually played a pretty clever move, rook up to e4. Now both knights are forked. If they capture an f3, then a simple king to g3, and they're going to end up losing a piece. If they try knight back to d2 to attack, I can just capture with the rook. I'm doing very well. And one thing I want you to start paying attention to here is my time. I only have 1:35 here, and my opponent has 7 minutes and 3 seconds, and I don't want to spoil too much, but 64 more moves happened in this game. Now, my opponent here played knight back to e6, knight f to e6. Once again, I do not think this was the absolute best. I think knight, whatever this knight is, knight d to e2 is a little bit more resilient because you're not trading any pieces. However, knight back to e6 does trade pieces, allows me to trade the knights, and once again, you don't want to trade knights when you're down pieces or any pieces. I now played rook to h4, attacking the pawn. My opponent here was a bit creative. They played knight to g5, defending the pawn, and don't just play a mindless f4 here and attack the knight, because now knight to f3 check, and yeah, this is very bad. I would have to run my king up, and after captures, my opponent can now play a5. they're going to end up making a passer on the queen side, and I am losing here. So instead of that, I played king to g3, running my king up, no forking business, and now f4 is justified and prepared. My opponent ran their king to the queen side, king to c7. It probably would have been slightly better here to immediately go for a move like pawn to a5 and start trying to get some pawns rolling, but they played king to c7. I now went to f4, knight dropped back. I captured the h7 pawn with check. They played king b6, and I now went f5. Attacking the knight and preparing to push and push and push and try to make a passed pawn. They move their knight to the d4 square, and here I just ran my king up once again, king to f4. f6 probably would have been the absolute best, but I didn't want to allow their knight to get in, just cause more hassle, so I played king to f4. They went c5 here. I now went rook to d7. Essentially, my plan to this move is I'm just going to sacrifice my rook and then promptly push and push and push and promote with a very easy game. They played king to c6 here, attacking the rook. I sacrificed, they captured back, and now I played king to e5. I did not push immediately because their king is actually fast enough to stop the pawn. I'm still completely winning, but why would I allow that? So I played king to e5. They now pushed pawn to a5, and I don't know what demon possessed me here, but instead of playing the extremely logical king to e6, blocking the king, and then playing this and this and this, I played king to f6. This is not a good move, because now my pawn is blocked, and I allow a whole world of complications. After b5, I capture, king captures back, king to e7, and now both pawns promote. So we now have a queen versus queen endgame where I am winning because I have 3 extra pawns. However, I also have 50 free seconds, and queen endgames are notoriously hard to win in positions like this because the queen can just give you millions and millions of checks, and that is kind of what happens here. So first, I start giving some checks. I play queen to b8 check here. Now their king cannot run to the a file because a simple queen to a8 and they get skewered. So instead, they played king to c5 here. And they tried to stay on the c and b files. I now played queen to c8 check. And basically here, I'm just playing checks, so I'm trying to make up my mind on what I'm going to do in this position. They played king to b6, gave another check. They moved, gave another check. And after queen to d6 check, and they moved once again, now I've gotten my queen to a better position because it's going to be able to block against some checks, and it's going to be more useful. So now I ran my king. I played king to f6. Now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to start getting my king next to my pawns and start trying to push and make a second queen and hopefully end up winning that way. They now played queen to c3 here. And I did not want to allow them to capture on c2 because not only would I lose that pawn and I could potentially lose d3 and then they would have a passed pawn, but also it would allow them to easily get to f2, and I mean there's just no reason to allow that. So I played queen to d7 check. They moved over to b8. I now played queen to b5 check. King moves, and now queen to c4 is what I played. Defending c2 pawn through an x-ray. Now obviously trading queens here would be instant death for them because my life is so much easier now, so they instead play queen to a1, preparing to move their queen over to the king side. I now played pawn to h4, pushed. They played king to b8. Don't really understand why they played that. I just pushed again. They now played queen to h1 here. Keep in mind, once again, I have literally 31 seconds here, and it's very stressful, as you can probably tell. I now played king to g6 here. And this is where my position kind of starts to fall apart because they played queen to g2 check. I ran my king to h7, and now they captured on f2. Now I tried pushing to h6 here, but the problem is because my queen is over on the queen side and kind of out of the way, not really in the defense, they can actually play infinite checks here after queen to f5 check. And after king g7, I tried to keep my pawn, but after some checks here, king 7, queen f5 check, king h8, queen e5 check, king g8, I realized that if I really just keep trying to defend my pawn, they're going to be able to check me forever, which is indeed true. So here, after queen g5 check, I unleashed a radical plan with under 20 seconds left. king to f7, realizing that my pawn cannot be defended, so I let them capture it. And what I'm going to try to do here is get my king over to their king and potentially form some sort of check that would force a queen trade or some sort of checkmate. Now, before they captured, they actually played some more checks. They played queen to f5 check first. I ran my king. They played this check. I ran my king, and now they captured on h6. But here I can actually force a queen trade, which I did do. I played queen to b5 check. Their king moved over to a7. I now played queen to a5 check. Their king moved over to b7, and after queen to c7 check, and they moved their king, this is where the pre-moved started. So first here, I noticed that their king only has two squares, a6 and a8, and both of those would result in queen to c6 being a forced trade. So I actually pre-moved queen to c6 here, forcing this trade here. So they captured, I recaptured, and now I pre-moved for the next 20 or so moves. I pre-moved to move my king down to then capture the pawn. I didn't push. I actually moved my king over and then pushed the d pawn. And once I moved it up enough, I moved my king behind it to then start pushing the other pawn. King d7. I played c3 here. I think I meant to go c4, but that was just a mouse slip. King d6, c4, king back to c7, c5, king to d7, and here I played king to e5 here. If I just pushed once again, then after king to c6, my position is kind of at a standstill. I am still winning here, but it's going to be a little bit trickier, and especially when I'm pre-moving, I really do not want to make an accidental move where that pre-move does not go through and everything gets bad. That's also why I didn't play c6 here, because once again, they can block my pawns up. So instead, I played king to e5. Now they moved, I played c6. The pawn is being threatened to be pushed, and along with its friends, they will both promote. So they played king over to d8. Now I ran my king closer, king c8, and now I have the typical way to win in these positions. Pawn to c7, king has to run out because of zugzwang, and now I move my king up, and promotion is unstoppable. So they moved, I promoted, c8 equals queen, king b5, I gave a check, and then because the king is now locked in a box here, I can actually keep on pre-moving. I played king to c7, and if no fear of stalemate, I can simply promote here because they cannot really do anything. Then moved over, and this is where I stopped giving pre-moves for the last two moves. I gave a check, they moved over, now they're very nice, queen c to a8, double queen, lawnmower, checkmate. Alright, thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you had a great day. Like, subscribe, do that stuff if you want to see more videos like this, and I will see you next time. Have a great day.